Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Omen from 2006, starring Julia Stiles, Liev Schreiber, Mia Farrow, David Thewlis, David Postlethwaite, forgive me if I said that wrong, Michael Gambon, and Seamus Davy Fitzpatrick, and directed by John Moore. Now, before I get into this movie, I did see this in movie theaters on a Tuesday, June 6th, 2006, when it originally came out, which I'll talk about that when I get into the show. Let's just get into this movie. We open in Rome with some priest theories of the devil's appearance, and I thought I put in the wrong disc, and it could have been in the alternate opening. We meet Robert Thorne, played by Liev Schreiber, who finds out he and his wife Catherine, played by Julia Stiles' baby dies, when she doesn't know, but instead adopts a baby boy, so he could spare the pain, which makes sense, and names him Damien. And my problem with this opening is, I honestly thought I put in the wrong disc, and it threw me off quite a bit, and I'm not connecting with Robert and Catherine as much as I did in the original. In fact, when we get to the current 5-year-old Damien, I'll compliment the movie then, but let's just get to this. Robert becomes ambassador of Great Britain after his boss dies by a toxic waste explosion, which was a bad idea to dump his boss in an explosion in the first 5 minutes. But this wants to be like the original, and they move to London like in the original movie. And there's going to be a lot of parallels between this and the original. So I'm going to say throughout the show, every single time I see something like that, just like in the original. Catherine takes Damien to the park, and Damien, played by Seamus Davy Fitzpatrick, gets lost just like in the original. And I'll give the casting director a compliment right off the bat by saying they cast the right actor playing Damien, because that kid looks fucking creepy. With his stares and his presence is the best thing about this movie, which isn't saying much. We get Damien's 5th birthday party, just like in the original. A lot of this is like in the original. What the fuck am I talking about? And also like the original, the nanny sees a dog and shouts to Damien, "It's all for you," but done much more poorly this time. While the party, we meet the photographer Keith Jennings, played by David Thewlis, and I don't care for the character this time around. Then Robert goes back to work and accidentally bumps Keith and meets Father Brennan, played by Pete Postlethwaite. I don't know if I'm saying that wrong, so please forgive me. And all this is like they're in the original, but done much more poorly, and I'm not connecting with any of these characters. And the only presence that's good is Damien, and again, it's not saying much. Catherine is frustrated about nanny hunting until they hire Mrs. Baylock, played by Mia Farrow, who's an okay presence. But to me, the movie goes to Damien, but the line readings are just so damn flat. And the dialogue being said by these actors, also very flat. Robert and Catherine try to go to a church, but overreacts just like in the original, and hurts Catherine, and I'm not as frightened as I am in the original with this thing. And this is unfortunately not as scary and interesting, and the acting is in this one is horrendous, and the scares are cheap, absolutely cheap. Robert finds a dog in Damien's room, telling Mrs. Baylock to get rid of it, just like in. And I'm just gonna stop saying this because this remake is obnoxious and disrespectful to the original, and if it still works, the original still works to this day, and didn't need a remake in the first place. Damien scares the baboons and gorillas, tries to break out, and that's not a good nor scary. Come on, give me something better as far as this movie doesn't deserve to exist. But as far as I'm concerned, it unfortunately does. Father Brennan this time tells Robert to meet him underneath the bridge from the theater, and he accepts. Meanwhile, Catherine is having dreams of a demonic presence by being brought by Damien, as he doesn't respond to Catherine, which feels weirdly placed in this movie. Robert meets Father Brennan underneath the bridge and tells Robert the same thing he does in the original, which is Damien is son of the devil and Catherine is pregnant, which she'll tell Robert as she wants an abortion, and Father Brennan to go inside a church, but instead gets killed by a spear, which how unoriginal. Speaking of unoriginal, Damien rides his Razor scooter and purposefully trips Catherine, which is like the original, but done in a Razor scooter. And the movie begins to lose me as Catherine is taken to the hospital and she says to Robert, "Don't let him kill me." And at that point, I can't take how much of a repeat this is to the original. Keith calls Robert about the pictures of the birthday party and Father Brennan, who got killed, like the way the movie showed it earlier. And Keith notices the demonic presence around Damien and the people around the Thorns. And they discover Damien has a birthmark of 36s, which is the number of the devil. And if you saw the first movie, you already know this ship is, but the script is with a few has a few updates, but it's not original. And I'm not liking the shots in this movie. It feels like the cinematographer and just like the director and writer of this doesn't give a fuck about whether this audience likes the movie or hates this movie. Hell, it gave me the finger, for Christ's sakes. And honestly, I'm down on the dislike button because of that. And they remade this thing and have it come out in the 6th month on the 6th day in the year 2006. I remember that day like yesterday. It was a Tuesday instead of a Friday or a Wednesday. And in fact, that the movie came out on a day where they can match the devil's sign is a cheat. And this movie feels like a robbery, honestly. Robert and Keith go to Rome and try to visit a hospital where Father's Bolito, forgive me if I said that wrong, that made the Thorns adopt Damien, but it was on fire after Damien's adoption, and they go to a church where they can find Father Bolito to find out where Damien's actual mother is, and he says she's dead and writes where the dead body is, which is Servati Cemetery. And they go there and get attacked by dogs. And the problem is, I felt, was it's trying to be so evil, but instead it's being rather stupid. That it's very insulting to the original Omen from 1976. And this thing lacks originality, and I am very bored when we get to Rome as it gets boring from there. Mrs. Baylock delivers flowers to Catherine while at the hospital as she puts a needle of air in Catherine's blood and kills her off in a most disturbing kind of way, which is sort of better for the screenwriters, but it's a terrible choice. And Robert hears about Catherine's death from his friend Tom over the phone, and Robert has the same dreams Catherine did about Damien, and Robert and Keith go to another place where Robert gets some tools to kill Damien, but Robert doesn't want to until next thing you know, Keith gets his head decapitated by a sign, and Robert takes the tools back home and goes straight to the house and traps the dog as he looks for the birthmark on Damien of the 36s and witnesses it with his eyes, and Mrs. Baylock comes out of the blue and just attacks Robert, and he knocks her out and grabs Damien to take him to the church and to stab him with the tools, but the cops come in and shoot Robert, and the next day the Thorns funeral comes and Damien stares at us with a creepy looking stare that this kid does look so fucking creepy, but the climax, I've seen it all before, and why did they remake this movie? I'll be asking myself that for years. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.9 out of 10. This is the poorest excuse of a remake like the 1998 Psycho, but I'll give it this. The actor playing Damien is so fucking creepy that they did a good job casting him. Unfortunately, this movie lacks originality, as a lot of the material is just like in the first movie, and I felt like this director gave me the finger, first of all, and didn't have a good reason to remake this, as it is very insulting to the original movie, and I will be asking myself for years, why the fuck did they remake this movie? At the end of the day, there's no real reason to. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you guys whenever I see you guys. Until then, the truth. Where does it end?